This is the true story of a lake that Australian engineers spent years building and then paid $108.1 million to destroy. 7 kilometers northeast of Benalla, in northern Victoria, Australia, construction finished on 9 October 1971, a 7.5 kilometer rock wall across a valley, creating Lake Mokoan, 365,000 megalitres of water, promised to farmers as drought security and to the River Murray as an emergency reserve. The flooding killed 150,000 river red gum trees almost overnight, some of them centuries old, scarred by Yorta Yorta hands to build canoes. For roughly 40 years, their bleached skeletons stood in the water like a warning nobody read. Then, in 2009, the Victorian government did something almost no water authority on Earth had attempted at this scale. It cut a single 10-meter gap into that same 7.5-kilometer wall and let the entire lake drain away on purpose. Here is the question at the center of this story. How does a government spend decades and hundreds of millions of dollars building something, only to conclude that tearing it down is the more responsible choice? And here is the shocking part. The bill for undoing Lake Mokoan came to $108.1 million, nearly double what was budgeted, making this one of the most expensive, deliberate unbuildings in Australian water history. By the end of this story, seed-firing drones will be replanting a forest from the sky. A frog silent since 1970 will be calling again, and a bird so rare its call was once blamed for the legend of a monster will turn up on camera in the reeds. Before any of this, the land belonged to the Yorta Yorta people, who had lived along these swamps and grasslands for thousands of years. European settlers took the country for grazing and cropping in the 1860s, and by the 1960s. State planners were eyeing the same swampland for something bigger. Winton Swamp, Green Swamp, and nearby wetlands, more than 11 of them spread across roughly 3,000 hectares of red gum forest and native cane grass. Engineers saw a natural basin. Drown it, they reasoned, and northern Victoria's driest farmland would finally have security. Construction ran through the late 1960s. When the wall closed on 9 October 1971, the local papers ran the headline, "Dam Open." At full capacity, Lake Mokoan held 365,000 megalitres of water across nearly 8,000 hectares, Victoria's fifth largest water storage, built almost overnight into a landscape that had taken millennia to form. On paper, it solved everything. In practice, the geometry of that lake was about to become one of the most expensive mistakes in Australian water history. The problem was shape, not size. Picture a dinner plate instead of a drinking glass. Lake Mokoan spread across almost 8,000 hectares, but at its deepest point measured only 7 meters. That enormous surface, baking under an Australian summer sun, turned the entire reservoir into an evaporation machine. Roughly 50,000 megalitres vanished into the sky every single year, not used, not leaked, just gone. 15 kilometers downstream, at a small diversion structure called Casey's Weir, built back in 1885, water managers could measure exactly what that meant. The lake was losing close to 21% of the Broken River's entire annual flow to nothing but heat and wind. Then came 1982. A brutal drought drained the lake almost completely on its own, exposing decades of nutrient-rich sediment to the sun. When the rain finally returned, those nutrients washed back into the water, and the 1990s brought blue-green algae, or cyanobacteria, blooms so severe the lake had to be closed to swimmers again and again. Livestock that drank from it got sick. By 2001, keeping Lake Mokoan running cost the state $676,000 a year, and that was before counting the price of the toxic water itself. Water engineers had a name for what Lake Mokoan had become: a stranded asset, too expensive to maintain, too broken to trust. And with the Millennium Drought tightening its grip on the entire Murray-Darling Basin through the 1990s and 2000s, the Victorian government could no longer justify pouring resources into a lake that gave back less water than it swallowed. None of this made the decision easy. For the families who lived around Lake Mokoan, the lake was not a spreadsheet problem. It was where their kids learned to water ski, where they fished every summer for 3 decades, where the local economy had quietly rearranged itself around a body of water that was never supposed to be permanent. In February 2008, more than 50 farmers gathered to protest its removal. A local group calling itself Justice for the Broken Valley led the fight. Group Secretary Michael Reed stood in front of reporters with a warning: "They've distorted the figures to get the outcome they wanted, and we are not going away quietly." Farmer David Rush backed him up, insisting officials had misled the public about how much water the region would actually lose. For years, the department's own head of water, David Downey, found himself negotiating delay after delay, trying to keep replacement supply promises from collapsing the whole plan. The Victorian government did not ignore any of this. In 2006, after years of consultation, it released what amounted to a peace treaty, a future land use strategy, admitting that recreational boating and water skiing would be lost forever, in exchange for a promise: a wetland of national significance. Ecotourism, a $20 million commitment to make sure the restoration did not fail. It was, in effect, a bet that a drowned lake could become something the community would eventually choose to defend. Then came the engineering, and this is where Lake Mokoan becomes genuinely strange. Nobody detonated the dam. Nobody demolished the wall. Engineers at the firm GHD calculated something far more precise: a single breach, exactly 10 meters wide, cut into a rock wall 7.5 kilometers long, set at an overflow height of 161.14 meters above sea level. Out of 7.5 kilometers of embankment, 10 meters came down. Everything else stayed standing. In January 2009, water managers stopped diverting the broken river into the lake altogether. By October of that same year, photographs show the basin empty, mud cracking under the sun where boats once idled. The logic was almost embarrassingly simple. Lake Mokoan had never needed brute force draining. Once the inflow stopped and that single gap was open, the lake's own worst feature, its absurd surface to volume ratio, the very thing that had been evaporating it into bankruptcy for decades, did the rest of the work for free. The same flaw that had doomed the project became the mechanism that unbuilt it. A community-based committee of management was formed to take over what came next, tasked with turning 7,000 hectares of drained lakebed and dead trees into something worth visiting. The clean numbers on paper did not survive contact with reality. Victoria's Auditor General later found the decommissioning had cost $108.1 million by early 2010, nearly double the $59.2 million originally budgeted back in 2004. Meanwhile, on the ground, a new danger appeared. As the mud dried, restoration workers feared the exposed lakebed would turn into a dust bowl, sending decades of algae-laced sediment blowing into nearby towns. Crews scrambled to sow native grasses across the bare ground before the wind could take it. That crisis passed, but a second, quieter failure was already underway. Everyone assumed the drowned forest would simply regrow on its own once the water left. It did not. River red gum, or Eucalyptus camaldulensis, seed cannot survive 40 years underwater, and the site's seed bank was gone. Worse, the newly exposed mud turned out to be perfect habitat for exotic weeds like paspalum and bracken fern, which spread fast enough to choke out any native seedling that tried to take root. Ecologists needed something more aggressive than patience. Their solution was to deliberately destroy the topsoil that was supposed to help. Then came the technology nobody expected. In mid-2023, an Australian company called Airseed flew a specially built drone named Artemis over the site, dropping roughly 40,000 biotech seed pods, each one coated in nutrients and protective biochar, across a 33-hectare stretch of wetland, following an earlier 50-hectare red gum trial that same year. There are parts of this reserve we simply cannot reach on foot, restoration manager Dr. Lisa Farnsworth explained. This is the only way to plant at the scale the site actually needs. Airseed's co-founder, Andrew Walker, put the maths just as plainly: 25 times faster than doing it by hand, and a fraction of the cost. The technology exists. The only question now is how fast we can scale it. The plan, if the trial worked, was to expand the technique across hundreds of hectares of standing dead red gum. The forest that took 40 years to die is now, slowly, being planted back from the sky. Underwater, something else was stirring. The growling grass frog had not been heard at Winton since 1970, wiped out the same year the dam went up. Getting it back took most of a decade. A feasibility study in 2017, population modeling by ecologist Dr. Jeff Hurd, custom-built quarantine ponds, and a community alliance called Task Force Growler coordinating it all. In March 2023, the first frogs were moved into an on-site quarantine lab. By October, they were calling from an outdoor breeding enclosure for the first time in over 50 years. Meanwhile, Carp screens went up on every inlet channel, and volunteers ran carp musters to physically drag invasive fish out of the water, giving native fish and frogs a fighting chance. Then, on a camera trap set up for an unrelated turtle research project, something rarer showed up: the Australian little bittern, a secretive, endangered heron barely anyone at Winton had dared hope to find. Its larger cousin, the Australasian bittern, is down to fewer than 1,000 mature birds left anywhere on the continent. A bird so elusive, and its deep booming call so eerie, that early European settlers blamed it for the legend of the bunyip. Nobody has recorded that boom at Winton yet, but its smaller relative is already living in the reeds. Ecologists call it exactly what it sounds like: a sign the food web underneath is working again. None of this erased what the land had lost. So, the Yorta Yorta people, whose scarred canoe trees had drowned along with everything else in 1971, were brought back into the project as traditional owners, not consultants. Walking paths connecting the visitor center now trace the shape of a long-necked turtle when viewed from above, the Yorta Yorta totem, and an outdoor art trail called Lotchapach Nachandanak, meaning pathway to a meeting place, now carries Yorta Yorta stories across land that once erased them entirely. The numbers tell the rest. Annual visitors climbed from 36,264 in the 2016 to 2017 financial year to over 65,000 by 2018 to 2019. School excursions rose from under 300 students a year to more than 2,000. The Society of Wetland Scientists has since named Winton Wetlands the first site outside the United States to earn Wetland of Distinction status. A lake that once cost the state $676,000 a year just to poison itself is now, by every measure, paying that debt back. Lake Mokoan was not a failure of ambition. The engineers who built it in 1971 were solving a real problem with the tools their generation trusted. What finally changed was the willingness, decades later, to admit the shape of that solution had become the shape of the problem, and that fixing it meant cutting exactly 10 meters, not building one more. If an entire government could unbuild nearly 40 years of concrete and admit, in public, that it had been wrong the whole time, it might be worth asking what else deserves that same kind of honesty. Follow along for the next one, because there is always another lake, another forest, another decision somebody is still too afraid to reverse. Hit subscribe so you do not miss it.